everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. And welcome to episode 229, Tips for Academic Mom Summer Planning. Sorry for the long title, but that's what we're doing today. I'm joined again with Heather Witcher. And if you are watching us on YouTube, you'll notice we're wearing the same outfits because we did these episodes back to back. This is an inspirational episode because Heather and I are both academic moms, and it just occurred to me we could kind of talk through some of the things we're thinking about how to plan for a summer to get some work done while we still have kids at home and just to figure out all of that stuff. So I will start with just a quick academic mom bio, and then I'm going to have Heather do that just so people understand like the ages of our kids when we're putting out some stuff. My children, I have a daughter who is in 8th grade going into high school, so she's 14. And then I have another daughter who is home from college that just finished a first year who just turned 19. So I have kids that are at home, one of who, I have one that can drive, which is always a bonus to have another driver in the house. And they will both be home over the summer. I don't need to find daycare or anything like that or camps. However, in the past, I just want to say this for academic moms out there, both of my children went to full-time daycare from pretty much when they were born until they started school. And then in the summers, both of them for a couple of the younger years went to like a full-time daycare / camp situation. I was the writing program director for a lot of that time, and a lot of my heaviest work was in the summer. So that was just a necessity at the time. However, I will say that as they got older, I became a little bit more flexible about how I managed some of those things. So then I got to a point where I was kind of alternating, like trading off, some childcare with friends when I had, say, a 6-year-old that couldn't stay home, by herself. I did babysitters for some of those days. So I did a combination of a lot of other things, but at least in my little bio here in those earliest years, really when my kids were through kindergarten and even the year after kindergarten, maybe even to like 2nd or 3rd grade, they also had a full-time care situation of some sort in the summer. So let me find out from Heather. Why don't you tell us about the ages of your kids and where you have them during the school year if they're not with you, and what you do in the summer.
Yeah, so I have twin boys, and they are 5. They'll turn 6 at the very end of this summer. And so they are currently in kindergarten going into 1st grade. And then I also have another son who just turned 4. And so he has cerebral palsy. And, so in addition to he is in full-time daycare, he also has physical therapy weekly. So I'm constantly kind of juggling that battle as well. But my twins, because they'll be home over the summer, we are going to do a combo of 1 week at a summer camp, and another week at home with mom while I am doing some teaching, doing some writing, working with my clients. And so, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a hectic ride because, I'm on the younger side where no one can stay home by themselves. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And and this is one of the things I was telling somebody the other day where they said, well, you have older children, you don't really need to worry about what they're doing in the summer, but that's sort of true and sort of not true. So, just while we're thinking through summer logistic things, and then I promise we're going to talk about scholarly writing for people that are like, when are you getting to the writing bit? I promise we're going to talk about it. But just because I do have these older children at home, I should be able to rely on my college daughter to be driving my junior high school daughter around. So in theory, I sort of have a built-in, at-home babysitter. But because she is a college student, she works to save money for college. And so she is at work almost every day. And her schedule is kind of flexible and not reliable. And it also overlaps with the time I would most need some driving completed. So my daughter, who is in 8th grade, just made high school cheerleading, and that sport at my particular district is pretty intense. They practice almost every day for multiple hours a day. It's pretty intense. And at the moment, I don't have anyone to drive her. So even though I don't have to find childcare per se, I have a pretty significant driving load. My partner is a dean. I've talked about that many times on the podcast, and has a significant load himself with academic travel and hours. So a lot of that driving will fall to me. So it's not, I'm not looking for childcare all day long, but I do have to think about those bigger things in a day when we're trying to think about how are we getting writing done. I will have that sort of automatic clock in my head, like, hey, you have to, go home by 4 to go pick up a kid, take her to practice, do these things. So that's on my radar. The other thing is that, and I've talked with parents of college students a lot about this. I only just became a parent of a college student this past year, but a lot of times summer is to do a lot of the things with your college student that you can't do at any other time of the year, like go to the eye doctor, or, go get a new retainer, or go to the dentist or whatever. So a lot of free time in there. I also have to think about scheduling in all those medical appointments and things like that. So that's true. They're not going to affect every single day. But there's something that I can't totally ignore. And the other part of it is that just from bringing home all of her stuff from college, I have to build in some significant time for us to deal with all of that stuff, and then also be ready to pack her up and send her off to school, because she will go back before I go back. So it's just a couple of things that it's not a childcare per se, but it is a time burden, which I'm interested in. So, what I thought we could talk about today is what we want to do this summer. So let's talk about the writing side first. Heather, why don't you talk about what you want to ideally do over the summer? I'll talk about what I want to ideally do, and then we'll talk about some tips for how we're going to try to pull it off.
Yeah.
So, what kinds of scholarly writing, or even if you have teaching or other things you want to talk about, tell us about those
Yeah.
too.
No, so my summer, I usually try to block out for getting the writing done that I have to do in order to meet expectations for my annual review, because I know I'm at a teaching heavy institution. So I know during the school year, I may not be able to devote as much time to writing as I would like. So I usually use my summer to get at least one article written this summer, because that is needed for me to meet expectations every year. So I have to have at least one article. I'm also the year's work reviewer for the top journal in my field. So I also use the summertime to read the year's work of Victorian women poets and begin writing that review. So that's the other big project that I have. And then I also have a book chapter that I was solicited to write, and it's like the Cambridge history of women's writing. So it's going to be a huge tome, but I'm excited to be working on that chapter too. So those are the three main projects that I've got going on this summer on my list.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a past episode, I believe it was just last week. So I need to really look at these episodes before I record. And I did one that I talked about our summer planning and writing strategies webinar that we just did this past week. So if you're like, oh, I missed that one, I wish I could get it, I'm happy to give the recording. Just email me, Christine at Defend Publish Lead. I'm happy to give it to you. But I think it was there, or possibly even in the podcast episode where I talked about that, just some summer planning. But one thing that I think is really interesting, so I'm going to kind of frame it in this way, is that if Heather does more writing in the summer to recognize the institutional context that she's at a teaching heavy institution, that she may not have the same time. She's getting some of her professional service taken care of. So I tend to sort of go the opposite way, where I write much more heavily during the year. I'm also at a teaching heavy institution, very heavy. So and it's one of those things that, at least for me, I have some pretty good writing habits that I've just managed to kind of pull it off in a very tight teaching institution during the year. But it always comes at a cost a little bit. So by the time I get to the summer, I'm like, I have been pushing since, August 15th or whenever we started. So I tend to do writing in the summer in a little bit kind of different way, maybe. One thing that I always do is take advantage of the month of May. May tends to be one of my best writing months, and this is, I think, a little bit of a holdover from when my finals week ended. Like my grades were all in by, May 5th or whatever day it was, but my children didn't get out of school till, say, May 28th. And so I was in a sweet spot where I had no obligations at my institution, and I still had childcare where children were not around. So that may that those habits have still held true, even though my college student is back. I'm still trying to do as much as I can in May. I mentioned somewhere, I believe it was on that podcast episode, that I'm working on a book about sabbaticals right now, and I'm really pushing to get rid of a proposal about that by the end of this month. So to me, that's sort of the big project. And then ideally, if I could knock out a couple other things, I do write columns for Inside Higher Ed, and I tend to write those in the summer because they're smaller. I kind of collect some ideas during the year. They're short form scholarship, like we talked about last week with short form book proposals. But at least for me, like those kinds of articles, they're sort of fun to do in the summer. I also do my professional service in the summer, so like manuscript reviewing and things like that. I know a lot of journals, it's hard for them to get people to review in the summer, surprisingly, because a lot of academics either take off or are doing their own work. So I will tell the journals I review for, I am totally happy to read anything you want, but give it to me between June 1st and August 1st or something like that. So I tend to check that box then. But one other thing, and this would sort of be if I could pull this one off in the summer, I'd feel really, really productive. But I have a half finished article that I always call my yucky writing project because I just keep putting it off. If I could knock that out sometime over the summer, that would be great. So, why don't we close with just some random tips? Like, how are we getting any work done with kids around? Like, let's say, what happens when, you have a day where you want to get some writing done, but you still have children at home. Let's talk through some of that stuff. So, Heather, what tips do you have for our academic moms out there?
So one of the first things that I intend on doing is, so I recognize that I write best in the morning. That is the best time for me to have some brain work to get to feel accomplished and know that I'm putting good things out into the world at that time. And so one of the things that I've started doing with my young kids is right after breakfast, they do I call it like their quiet art craft time. So they are hanging out at the table doing a quiet activity, as quiet as, 5 and 4-year-olds can be when they're, hanging out with their best friends at the table. But they know that for at least 1 hour, that is what they're doing. All the crafts are out. They are self-sufficient at that point. And I have to be okay with that. So if a little bit of marker goes on the wall, okay, you know what? It's all washable. Like I just have to know in my head, like that's gonna be fine. And then we move outside. I'm lucky that I have a backyard. And that was like one of the selling points of where I live, so that they can go run amok, get a little bit of energy out, and that gives me another solid hour of writing time. So that's like my first tip is acknowledge when you are most productive, and then plan if you have your kids at home for them to be doing something that they can isolate themselves kind of and know that they're going to be okay and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And so let's do this. Let's alternate a couple tips. So I do want to like agree with the art craft thing. We still have I if I can find a picture of this, I may put this in like show notes or I'll throw it up on like LinkedIn or something like that. Let me write myself a little note here. And Heather may have this too, but I still in my kitchen have this weird corner cabinet that had like the Lazy Susan, like the turntable thingies in the corner. My house was built in 1978. And that was always our art cabinet because those Lazy Susan turny things never turned. They were broke the day we bought the house. And,
Yep.
so we just shoved all the art supplies in there, and I still have them all in there. So you'll see all kinds of random fun stuff that which should make a great picture. But I will say that crafts, when my girls were home in the summer, that was always a good thing. And also, we subscribed to something called Kiwi Crate. I don't even know if that's still around. It's
It
the
is.
little box of the month with an art project. That was something that was well worth the investment for kids that are maybe just slightly older than Heather's, but not too much older, like sometime somewhere between like 7 and 12. I don't remember how much the subscription costs per month, but basically what it is in the mail, the kids get a little craft kit every month. But it is kind of cool because the crafts are all different. Like we made this really cool like terrarium garden with these felt plants that was just beautiful. We made like some pottery things. We made this really cool light box thing with a battery. I mean, there was just so many good crafts, and honestly, like those boxes were really helpful even during the pandemic, so we can't ever rule out having to do that again. And I know for me, like we were still getting those, and those were a little bit of a lifesaver. So it just kind of brought some stuff. And the other thing is all the things they gave you in the crate, a lot of the things were tools you could reuse for other crafts. So I also did a lot of art with them, and even like old magazines and scissors and a glue stick. And sometimes what I would do is I'd put art of the day up on the fridge. So that way, and then I could pitch it at the end of the day. So any
Yes.
academic mom getting overwhelmed by the sheer volume of what your kids are making, we just called it art of the day. When they were finished with it, they threw it on the fridge, and at the end of the day, it went in the trash, and we got a new art of the day the next day. So yeah, craft supplies are great. Another tip that I would say with it, I like this idea about working with your energy, but having basically a backup solution if you can't. So, for example, I talk about how I'm sort of now an early afternoon writer. I was more of a late afternoon, now I'm more like early afternoon, but I've got to recognize that, especially in the summer, especially when my children were younger, if they weren't in a daycare situation, that was the best time to take them to the pool or take them, over to a friend's house or do something like that. So I always had to have a backup slot. And for me in the summer, it did tend to be in the early morning before everybody got up. I That's not my preferred time to write at all, but sometimes I would just say I kind of can count on them sleeping in a little bit later. So if I just get up a little bit earlier, I could do some work. Not ideal, but I always like having a backup slot. What's another tip you have, Heather? Let's alternate a couple more.
So another thing that I do is I rely on my community. So I don't have family that live near me, but I do have colleagues who are really fun to be with. And so we are planning once a month. So it's not going to be like a daily kind of thing, but once a month we will gather at somebody's house. And basically, it's going to be like group childcare, and someone's older child, so maybe like Christine, your kid's age, is going to be like in charge of that. But that's also going to be an accountability thing for me to be able to work with my colleagues, have like a writing date, um, and then also say like, okay, this is what I actually accomplished in the past like month, because that's also something that I often will struggle with is, okay, I've got these three main projects that I identified, am I making progress? Uh, you know, uh, Sometimes the kids have taken over, right? And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
so not doing as much as I thought I was. That accountability check-in kind of helps me reframe, reset, and get going. So if
Mhm.
there's the possibility of doing, and it doesn't need to be necessarily your colleagues, like, I have another friend who uses like her street, her neighbors, those kinds of things. So allowing to lean on your community when you can during the summer to get some productive work done can be helpful too.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I know one thing that I did just the last couple years is my university had some day camps for kids. They were just like single days or like maybe 1 week of like a sports camp or something like that. And I know for me, if once I kind of caught on to the camp schedule at my own university, if I could send my kids, I did because I could take them to work with me and get some work completed. So, it had some built-in benefits there. Plus, there was a faculty discount, which was great. Another tip that I would say that I like to do with summer is I think sometimes we'll have clients that get into the trap like, well, I still have to work and summer's my time to get all my good work done. And, these kids, they'll just, have to do these, kind of have to recognize that. And of course, it's not that you don't love your children and all that. There's no guilt at Defend, Publish, and Lead. But I'm just saying that, a lot of people get frustrated just by the circumstances that summer's the best time for them to get work completed, but that's also the time where they have the highest, bulk of child caring responsibilities. So I know one thing that I did a long time ago, and it still holds, is that with both of my daughters, we have this, we kind of give summer a new energy with a couple of like fun summer supplies. So when they were younger, it might have been something cool they could take to the pool or more sidewalk chalk where they could go out on the driveway or, things like that. Now that they're older, I was telling somebody about that and they said, do you still do some summer things? And, a couple years ago, my younger daughter was kind of getting into cooking. And so we got some really cool, like, different cookie cutter things we could bake with that were summer themed and all that. But last year, I told somebody that, what I got both my girls is I got them tanning pools and they were like, what? The UV and cancer and et cetera, and et cetera. And I'm like, I know if anybody wants to give me comments, go ahead, give me comments. But where we put them, they basically are like these little inflatable, they look like a kiddie pool, but somebody can lay in them individually and they have a pillow. And so we put them out in the backyard and they could lay out there and read. And for the record, we have a lot of trees in my backyard. So they really were not getting all that much sun, but it was just kind of like a fun space where they could be outside. So I knew they weren't just, sitting watching phones all day and they wouldn't take their phones out there so they could, read a book while they were sitting out there. So I had to get a little bit creative, but I just know for me, like sort of recognizing for them that summer is really special and having some kind of like last day of school thing that we're going to be able to do all summer or use all summer is helpful. So let's do one more. Give me one more, Heather, and I'll do one more.
So I think, talking about like mom guilt, and that kind of thing, screen time gets a bad rep, right? But I do not think that there is a problem with using it as a tool sometimes, especially on those rainy days, which tend to happen over the summer, right? So I will also, and this is especially true, so this is probably an odd fact about me, but I do write while I cook, like the spaghetti sauce is simmering and I've just got my laptop right there next to me and I'm just, banging away. So sometime and it works, like the creative juices are flowing. And so I will pop my students, my children, my children in front of the TV, right? And that's when they get to watch, their biggest thing right now is Moana 2. So that's an hour-ish, an hour and a half maybe long movie, where they are, fully, enjoying themselves. And I get that hour and a half to finish dinner and get a little bit last minute writing done and kind of plan ahead for what I'm going to do for the next day. So that's my last tip is screen time can be your friend and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, this is kind of goes along with that too, because we do get some people that will ask about screens and certainly people are like very anti-screen and I get it. I mean, especially as my children have gotten older, in some ways I'm completely appalled at how much screen time my eighth grader spends in middle school every day. She has a laptop, all of her homework's done on it, and you can see the screen time on the laptop that she's using. So she's got some kind of like a PC notebook kind of thing that she uses. But one of the things that I saw, like she was having me look over some slides and proofread for her and just make sure they were good for a presentation. And there was a way to look at it. And I was just like, she has had this laptop going for 7 hours, almost more than 7 hours by the time I looked at it. And I realized that's just an average Thursday or whatever at her school. So I totally get concerns on it. And yeah, so I will say I was also one not to ever police it. But what I did instead is I tried to say, what are a couple things in a regular summer day that I feel are non-negotiable? And then I just didn't worry about the rest. So like, and these pretty much have still held true. One of the things was always getting outside. So with the exception of rain days, and sometimes even then, like I'm in Ohio. Our weather is terrible much of the year. So outside was sort of non-negotiable. Like at least sometime during the day, they had to go outside. And that still holds true. Although now with my tanning pools, they're going to go back out there. I still have them. Um, but another one that was, I liked them to have some kind of a connection, like meaning they could, hang out with friends, talk to friends. This is why I didn't get super fussy about the phones or see family, but basically they couldn't just hole up in their room all day long and not talk to anybody. So they had to have some kind of social connection. Was another thing every day. So it didn't mean they had to go somewhere every day, but they were at least connecting with a friend or talking to my dad or something. And then the two other ones, one was sort of like they got to get some fruits and vegetables. I'm not the greatest school lunches. I need to do a whole episode on how I hate making school lunches, but I just got a little bit more like, hey, in the summer, the fruit and vegetables are great. I'm in a more rural area. And so, farmers markets are everywhere and all that kind of stuff. So I really tried to say, hey, let's just try to eat a fruit or a vegetable the rest of the day. I don't really care, but like get something in. And then the last one, especially when they were younger, is the library or some kind of a reading option. We always made it a point to make a weekly library trip. And even now, both of them, I will make like before we start the summer, I'll say, okay, let's go up to Barnes and Noble or go somewhere and you can buy, a good summer read. I don't make them read every day. I don't police it, and I haven't for a long time. But usually, voluntarily, they'll both choose something and kind of read a little bit here and there. And to me, like if those things are happening, I'm just not worried. Like, hey, they might have watched a movie for 4 straight hours or something like that. So yeah, kind of a similar tip, but sounds like we're on the same page. Okay, so one of the last things I want to close us with then is we are having a free webinar on Monday, June 2nd at 11 a.m. Eastern for academic moms who just want to get some tips on how to manage all the things. You can join us this summer. That would be fabulous. You can also get the recording if you're listening to this late. I will put the link in the show notes to register. And I'm going to share another thing from Textbook and Academic Authors Association. They're our sponsor. They're my only sponsor because I actually use them. And I've mentioned the conference that's coming up on June 6th and 7th. I want to point out one session that Heather and I both discovered when I popped this up on the screen. So I'm on YouTube showing, or for those of you on YouTube, you can see me scrolling to this, but if you're a podcast listener on Spotify or Apple, you can find this. If you just look at the Textbook and Academic Authoring Conference program, if you scroll down, you can see what sessions are happening. And they have this one session that was kind of buried in there. And let me see if I can find it. It was on succession planning. Oh, there it is. Okay. So one of their sessions is called Succession Planning, Finding, Onboarding, and Training New Co-Authors. And this caught both of our eyes. And I think one of the things I like about this particular session is that so many of us work on co-authored projects and then somebody bails on you, somebody disappears, somebody has to drop the project. Maybe one phase of the project closes, but then now you need to do something else with it. And now you need to find another co-author. Or if you're a faculty member and you have graduate student co-authors, they graduate and they move on and they go other places. So I have not been in a position where I've had to find somebody new, but I've definitely had to find new co-editors for bigger projects and things like that. So I like this idea of just thinking through a project from start to finish. And I will link in the show notes one of our episodes on doing collaborative work, because one of the things in that episode, I don't remember what number it is, but I will link it in the show notes. One of the suggestions is basically having a contingency plan. And what that contingency plan is basically what happens if somebody doesn't do the work. Everybody's agreeing ahead of time that, oh, okay, if Max bails, then the co-authorship or the authorship order will then shift up a level, or this person will take on making the figures for that publication. So I really like this idea of thinking through how to do that. And I know for me, that will be a session I will be going to. So the conference is all virtual. It's very cheap to join, and you get a membership to Textbook and Academic Authors Association with it. So you can't go wrong there. And I think that's probably everything on the conference. So thanks for joining us again, Heather, and happy writing, everybody.